The Percy Jackson series on Disney Plus released Season 1 last December 19, 2023, and personally, I think it's a pretty good adaptation of the first book of PJO, or The Lightning Thief. However, the show did tweak and edit some parts of the book, and in this video, I gathered 10 things show fans wouldn't know if they didn't read the book. These would be facts that the show brushed off or removed, and before getting into it, spoiler warning for the Lightning Thief book and the show. With that, let's get started. Number 10. Blue Food Origin. In the first episode of the show, we see Sally Jackson, or Percy's mom, hold up blue cookies, and it's a sweet Easter egg for fans like me. However, I realized that the show never actually explained why the cookies were blue and why Sally has them. If you've been to the Percy Jackson fandom, then you would have seen a lot of fans who love joking or making blue food, and it's been an inside joke for a while. But for show or movie fans, it can be pretty confusing. Like, why is it a big deal for book fans? It's literally just a quick shot, and it's almost forgotten immediately after that, but here's the explanation. Sally Jackson, or Percy's mom, works at a candy store, and one day, she got into an argument with her husband at the time, Gabe Agliano. Gabe mentioned how there was no such thing as blue food, and to prove him completely wrong, Sally started making blue food. These would be cookies or pancakes, and they were kind of her silent rebellion against her horrible husband. Percy also loves the color blue, and he and his mom shared their love of blue food together whenever they were away from Gabe. Number 9. Gabe Agliano's abusive behavior. Speaking of Gabe earlier, the show changed Gabe's character quite a bit. I mean, he was still the annoying jerk that Percy and Sally had to put up with, but he wasn't as bad in the show. In the show, his personality seemed to be used as a mild annoyance, and not that much of a threat. Sally even manages to shut him down at a part of episode 1, and it's clear that Gabe still listens to her by the end of the day, when this wasn't the case in the book. In the book, it's clear that Gabe was absolutely horrible to both Percy and Sally. It's even implied that Gabe used to hit Sally before and was abusive to her and Percy. It also adds a layer of sadness, as Percy always went back to a home like this. Gabe's horrible behavior and personality is why the last scene of Gabe getting stoned is much more satisfying in the book, because he absolutely deserved it, whereas in the show, it was just a random scene thrown in there. Some people think that it's too much of a horrible fate for Gabe in the show because he doesn't seem that bad, but book fans like me were cheering when Gabe got stoned. Plus, the show had Gabe getting stoned by accident, but the book made it clear that Sally intentionally stoned Gabe in the end. I kind of get why they toned down Gabe's violence though. It's a pretty sensitive topic for a lot of people, but if we're going to go back to what is canon in the novels, Gabe was pretty much a horrible husband and father. Number 8. Annabeth's crush on Luke. Annabeth Chase is one of the main characters in PJO, and in The Lightning Thief, or the book season 1 of the PJO series adopted, it's clear that she has a crush on Luke. I went into great detail about Annabeth and Luke's relationship in my video of how the Disney Plus show changed Luke for the better, so you can check that out. But ultimately, I was trying to point out how the Disney Plus show made the right decision in removing this aspect entirely. Annabeth's crush on Luke is part of why she cares about him so much, but it doesn't really develop into anything later on because Annabeth eventually saw him as a brother instead of a romantic partner. Which, side note, is a pretty good thing because the age difference was kinda concerning. To me, Annabeth is too young for Luke, and her crush on him was just something she felt because she looked up to him as a kid. Ultimately, book Annabeth had a crush on Luke and tried doing things to impress him, but the first season of the show did not have this detail at all. Number 7. The Hellhound Attack. One change that some book fans overlooked was the removal of the Hellhound Attack in the show. The Lightning Thief book introduced us to hellhounds, which are dog or wolf-like creatures from the underworld, but this never happened in the Disney Plus show. In the book, Luke actually summoned a hellhound to attack Percy, and Chiron had to kill it. I kind of like this change though, because it was a pretty reckless thing for Luke to do in the book, and it didn't really feel right to add in the show. It's a great moment of excitement and shock in the book, but I guess some things can't really get translated well if you adopt it on the screen. Number 6. Annabeth's fear of spiders. This is another thing that the show overlooked, mainly because they changed up what happened in the water park, specifically when they tried to get Ares' shield. In the show, we see this statue holding Ares' shield, and there's a throne. We of course learn that this throne was a trap made by Hephaestus, and Percy sacrifices himself to get the shield. In my previous review of this episode, I mentioned just how much I liked this change, because it showed Percy's fatal flaw of personal loyalty, as Percy always had a tendency to sacrifice himself for his loved ones, and I think this scene perfectly showed that. Plus, as a mythology nerd, I love the idea that the throne was actually from the myth of Hephaestus and Hera. So, long story short, Hephaestus made this throne as a gift for Hera, but it was actually a trap. The moment Hera sat down on it, she couldn't get out, and it was Hephaestus' revenge on Hera, as Hera once threw Hephaestus out of Mount Olympus because he was apparently very ugly for a baby. So, seeing the myth be incorporated in this episode of the show was pretty cool for me, but this never actually happened in the book. In the book, the task to get Ares' shield was very different, as Hephaestus' obstacle wasn't this throne, but was actually a group of mechanical spiders. And I guess that's why a part of me is still grateful for this change in the show. I think seeing the throne is better than watching mechanical spiders chase after Percy and Annabeth. But since the spiders were a thing in the book, we learned that Annabeth was actually deathly terrified of spiders, and how this fear was actually very common for children of Athena. This because Arachne, the mother of spiders and Athena's rival, was known to traumatize Athena's kids, and Annabeth experienced spider attacks when she was growing up. Because of this, Annabeth pretty much froze when the mechanical spiders ran to her and Percy had to get them out of there. It's kind of the opposite in the show, as in that part, Percy was the one immobilized, and Annabeth had to get them out of there. Again, I still enjoyed this change in the show, but since the show changed the task to get Ares' shield, they couldn't mention Annabeth's fear of spiders, unlike in the book. Number 5. Luke's scar origin. One thing show fans would have noticed is a scar that runs down Luke's eye in the show. I actually made a video on Luke's scar, so if you want to check that out, it's linked down below. But anyway, this scar was actually not explained at all in the show. It's pretty much just a part of Luke that nobody ever questioned, but we actually get an explanation in the book. In the book, we learn that Luke got that scar from a quest he had when he encountered the monster Ladin. Luke failed that quest, and Ladin was the one who gave him the scar. From that point, Luke was never the same again. He was filled with so much resentment against the gods, and he decided to join Kronos. The scar may be a little detail for show fans, but for book fans like me, we all know that this scar was a pretty big part of Luke's life, as it not only symbolized his failed quest, but also his descent to the dark side. Number 4. Hades. Hades is played by Jay Duplass in the show, and I have to admit, he's a great actor. I love this energy on screen, and I think he's really talented. But he wasn't exactly the Hades that I pictured in the book. I don't mean this appearance-wise, even if there are some differences, but this was a non-issue to me. What I'm trying to point out is the difference in vibe and personality that Hades had in the book. Hades in the show was relaxed, pretty chill, and honestly happier than Hades was in the book. In the book, he felt more like a tragic victim because everyone thought that he was the one who stole the lightning bolt when this was not the case. Hades also lost his Helm of Darkness and was framed up by Kronos, especially since he's kind of the outcast god. He's not an Olympian despite being part of the big three just because Zeus hates him. Hades is bitter and angry when Percy and the gang meet him in the book, but in the show, Hades seems unbothered and completely chill. It's such a huge shift, and at first I was pretty skeptical about this portrayal of Hades because, again, it feels like the complete opposite of the book. However, I tried researching more about it and realized that this was the Hades that the actor Jay Duplass interpreted from the book. In Jay's idea, Hades was a tragic character who was shunned by Olympus and framed up, but ever since, Hades acted as if he didn't care even if it hurt. In this comic book article's words, despite what Hades may proclaim, Duplass thinks that the god of the dead is on a "I wasn't fired, I quit" mentality. This is a very interesting take on Hades, and with this new information, I really like this idea. It seems like Hades' happy-go-lucky nature in the show was just a front because he is hurting inside. Hades is not happy, and although the book was very clear about this through Hades' actions and attitude, Jay decided to play a more subtle approach to Hades' sadness by using this happy and calm front. Number 3. The Ares fight. Aside from the fact that the fight took place in Santa Monica Beach and the show made it happen near Percy and Sally's Montauk house, there's a pretty big change if you compare the book and the show. For the most part, the Ares versus Percy fight is pretty accurate. Percy eventually cuts Ares' heel, and it's exactly how I imagined it when I read the book too. However, there's one big change that they overlooked. After Percy cuts Ares, Ichor spills just like in the show, but it doesn't stop there. Ares gets furious at Percy and would have killed Percy then and there, but something stopped them. It was a dark force, and it was Kronos forcing Ares to back down, because Kronos thinks that Percy is the key to his return as mentioned in the show. The show cut this pretty vital part completely because there, Ares just glowed and left. I don't really know what to feel about this change. I think it's important to show that Kronos was there to restrain Ares because Ares would have murdered Percy, but the fact that they didn't do this just brings up the idea that Percy managed to make a god surrender. This is not fully the case in the book though, because Ares would have killed Percy if Kronos hadn't stopped them, so I think it's a pretty big shift. Also, by the end of the fight, Ares actually cursed Riptide. Ares told Percy that the next moment Percy ever needed Riptide, he won't be able to use it. It's a pretty huge threat, and I won't spoil what happens in the future, but it was a really big deal in the books. Number 2. Hermes. I couldn't even specify what about Hermes because there's a lot to unpack here. In season 1 of PJO, we meet Hermes in episode 6 in the Lotus Hotel, but this never actually happened in the book. Hermes wasn't even in the Lightning Thief, as its first appearance was in the Sea of Monsters, or the book season 2 is going to adapt. In my review of episode 6 last time, I remembered liking Lin-Manuel Miranda's portrayal of Hermes, and I mentioned how I didn't like one thing about Hermes' character in the show, but that Lin is not fully to blame because it kind of goes to the writers of the show. So let me explain. In the show, we see Hermes as this pretty chill god just like in the book, before it shifts to Luke. It's pretty book accurate, especially this entire spiel.
I was warned to stay away from Luke and his mother. Warned that no matter how much I tried to help, I would just make things worse. And I went anyway. And it wasn't just awful for Luke. It was awful for all of us. Do you know what that feels like? To be so close to someone you love, knowing neither of you has any choice but to keep hurting each other.
Like, that last line is so spot on, and honestly, I think they did a pretty good job. But there's one thing that might go unnoticed by show fans. In this episode, it's pretty clear that Hermes had already given up on Luke, and he thinks that there's nothing he could do, which kind of goes against Hermes in the books, and that's why I'm not a huge fan of this change. In the Sea of Monsters, we first meet Hermes with Percy in camp, and Hermes actually recruited Percy to get Luke back to the good side. Hermes explained how he can't interfere as a god, but that Percy might be able to talk some sense into Luke. So it's clear in the books that Hermes is willing to bend a few laws just to get Luke back, but in the show, it seems like he thinks it's pointless already. So I'm not really sure what Rick and the gang are going to do about this in future seasons. Hermes asking Percy for help is a pretty big portion of the Sea of Monsters, and it really shows how some gods do care about their kids deep down. Added to this, I hate that Hermes knew he was slowing the trio down in this episode. That does not feel like the Hermes from the book at all, because in the Sea of Monsters, Hermes even gave Percy the multivitamins to help them with his quest. By delaying the trio, Hermes pretty much did the opposite of what he did in the Sea of Monsters. It might be a small detail, but if you think about it more, this is a pretty bad decision, and let me explain. Percy, Annabeth, and Grover were on this quest to prevent a civil war among the gods, and Hermes would have known this as a god himself. So, when Hermes purposely let the trio miss their deadline for the quest, he was risking a full-on Olympian war, especially since in the show version, they actually missed the deadline. So, the trio situation was even worse in the show because they were already bracing themselves for war. That is not something Hermes in the book would have done at all. Like, I'm not saying that Hermes is a saint or anything, because he is very flawed, especially as a parent, but I would never picture Hermes doing this to the trio at all. Hermes' action here also solidifies the idea that he doesn't care, and it makes him look even more pessimistic, while he started out as optimistic for Luke in the books. And last but not the least is number 1, Luke and Percy's final fight. Luke Castellan's betrayal is the most important part of both the book and the show, but a pretty big change happened in episode 8. In both the book and the show, Percy pieces together that Luke is the Lightning Thief this entire time. But after this, things change. In my old review of episode 8, I mentioned that I was shocked when Percy and Luke started fighting each other. It's a pretty surprising scene for book fans like me, because this never actually happened in the book. In the book, Luke and Percy continue talking, and Luke summons a scorpion to kill Percy. Percy challenges Luke to fight instead so that it would be a fair fight, but Luke disagrees. In Luke's words, "Nice try, Percy, but I'm not Ares. You can't bait me." It's a very dark part of the book because Percy almost dies from the scorpion poison, and Luke leaves the scene with Backbiter just like in the show. Also, Annabeth was not present in this scene in the book, though I have to admit that adding her here was a pretty good detail. It's heartbreaking, but still, this never actually happened in the book, and Luke didn't want to fight Percy. However, I do like this fight scene, especially since it's a pretty good action sequence, and Luke tries to persuade Percy to join him. This again differs from the book because in the book, Luke wanted to kill Percy. The idea that Luke wants Percy to join Kronos is a way better choice in my opinion, because as Kronos mentioned in the show, Percy's survival can be the key to Kronos' return. This is because of the great prophecy that foretold that a half-blood of Zeus, Poseidon, or Hades would one day turn 16 and either destroy or save Olympus. So Kronos is partially right. Percy is a half-blood of Poseidon, and he could turn 16 and destroy Olympus for Kronos, and that's why Luke wants Percy to join Kronos. Percy also has a pretty good reason to say yes, because Luke's reasoning for joining Kronos is because of Luke's hatred for his father Hermes. It's a very interesting scene because Percy could have chosen the dark side with Kronos and Luke, but he stood his ground and chose the good side. It's an interesting concept, but ultimately a great change on the filmmaker's part. And those are the top 10 things show fans won't know if they didn't read the book. So how about you? What else did the show overlook? Let me know in the comments down below.